This podcast is brought to you by the Islamic Center and NYU. For more information, visit our website at www.icnyu.org.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So today I thought we would look at Surah Quraysh. Hope everyone's doing okay, inshallah. I know we haven't met in a couple of weeks. I was on Umrah 2 Mondays ago, which is a really amazing experience, alhamdulillah. We were just talking and it was like super empty. There's nobody there. So if you've ever been, my friends and I were able to like literally stand in the front row for most prayers, alhamdulillah. There was like 30% of the mataf area where people are like making tawaf around the Kaaba was filled. Like the majority of it was pretty empty. And it was just really nice to be there, alhamdulillah. And then last week we were going to meet, and I think we canceled last minute. Just ran into some issues at the airport when I landed. Not like immigration wise, which was typically the case, but the airlines forgot or misplaced 14 passenger suitcases. And so one of my friends didn't have his stuff. And then I was dealing with some like health issues and other things. And so the combination of the two, just I wouldn't have been able to make it here in time. So I appreciate you guys coming out as we're trying to ramp it up again. Next week, we're going to also not be meeting because the university is closed in recognition of Juneteenth. Monday is a holiday. And so we won't meet in person on Monday. I don't know if we'll meet over Zoom or not, but we'll send it out over the emails. But the building is going to be closed next Monday. So we won't be meeting that day. So I thought we could look at Surah Quraysh. Because we've been looking at some of the shorter chapters. We looked at Surah Ikhlas, we looked at Surah Kawthar. And with a lot of the things happening in the world right now, things that we're seeing in terms of just conflict, oppression, but also things that we're seeing, that are not new phenomenons, but they're still very jarring in terms of mass shootings that are taking place, and a lot of just what consequently is coming thereafter, both on a systemic level, seeing the challenges that arise in how politicians and lobbyists kind of respond, and wealth in and of itself becomes more of the motivator than just what is the common good. And people start to lose a sense of security and peace of mind. I thought looking at Surah Quraysh would be interesting because essentially as a chapter, it talks about favors that were bestowed on the people of Quraysh, and in particular cites economic stabilities, financial stabilities, and it talks about how they have a certain security that Allah has afforded to them in terms of food security, as well as just safety, security from fear that comes from living under aggression, hostility, things that we're seeing many people kind of wrestle with and struggle with today, and trying to think about some of those things in the context of this chapter. So this is a chapter that's pretty short. It's only 4 verses. I'm sure most of us have heard it before, if not memorized it, recited it a bunch of times. One of the other reasons why we started with Surah Ikhlas and Surah Kawthar is because they're the chapters that sometimes we tend to read a lot as we're kind of rushing through prayers and, trying to just get at the end of Fajr or, manage to pray Dhuhr and Asr while at work or in between classes. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? We looked at a lot of different narrations, hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ had companions that would complain that other companions would read Surah Ikhlas again and again and again. And they would say, we just have a love for it, right? We talked about like the multitude of lessons that one can derive from Surah Al-Kawthar and just the depth that comes from this really short chapter that has so much meaning to it. Surah Quraysh is also a chapter that's not that long. There's a lot that we can pull from it in terms of insight, lessons, ethics, historical accounts. But it's also a chapter that you would see companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they would recite it quite regularly, and they would have a relationship with it. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, there's hadith that speak in specific about him reading Surah Quraysh when he led people in prayer, and he would read it in conjunction with the chapter that was before this, Surah Fil, because we'll talk about it in a bit, but there is a connection between the two chapters, right? They have similar meanings, and the content relates to one another in very deep ways. But they were reading this chapter. You'll find a lot of different recommendations that some would say are authentic, some would say are not, in terms of other benefits and blessings that this chapter has. There's an English tafsir that was originally in Urdu. It's called Ma'arif al-Quran. It's been translated into English. You could Google it, find it, PDF online. If you want to read like an English tafsir commentary on the Quran, and Ma'arif al-Quran, in the commentary on this chapter, the Sheikh cites a lot of different recommendations from his teachers and other luminary scholars of our tradition that would say that someone's in a state of anxiety, they're in a state of fear, they have insecurity, they should recite Surah Quraysh because of what it's talking about, some of the barakah that comes from the chapter in and of itself. We're going to go through it verse by verse, talk about it in a few different ways. But essentially, it's a chapter that is looking at a connection between a recognition of blessings from God and how that becomes now a call to action to be a basis of worshiping the divine. It's a Meccan surah, and we've talked about the difference between Meccan surahs and surahs that are Madanese. Does anybody remember or know the difference? What's the difference between a Meccan surah and a Madanese surah? You look like you want to say something. Oh, you do? Yeah. So what do you think? What's the, if you were to guess? Yeah.
I already guessed it.
So what does the hijrah have to do with it?
I think you said that. I think it's the Madanese surahs that are once they make hijrah to Medina.
Yeah, so after the hijrah, those are like surahs that are classified, verses that are classified as Madanese. The ones that are prior to the hijrah, the migration, those are called Meccan surahs. They're not necessarily revealed in Mecca or in Medina. And so the Meccan surahs tend to have characteristics that talk about things that you would imagine in real time being revealed to people. They're talking about the oneness of God. They're talking about the existence of an afterlife, things that are kind of weaning people's hearts towards Islam as a religion, having people kind of break out of default settings and start to think about things a little bit distinctively. The Madanese surahs, the verses, they tend to talk about things that you would assume in real time as a community is being established, as a state is being established, legal injunctions. How do you kind of interact with people in different ways, right? So mandates that are now do's and don'ts coming in, both from the standpoint of individual practice, as well as from the standpoint of communal practice, right? So how do I practice Islam legalistically? Because faith is established in Mecca, and the ritual now that attaches itself to the faith is coming to you in Medina. How do we like decide how we interact with each other? And so this chapter is considered to be a Meccan chapter. And a lot of what we're going to look at in terms of themes and ideas are going to also be things that kind of elicit those same points of, you know, who is God? What is the idea of our relationship to the divine? How do we start to build kind of a solid foundation in the recognition of our faith? So where it starts out with, we start to just break down the verses. The first part that is really critical here is, if you can't read the Arabic, the first letter here is a lam. right? And the lam in and of itself is a preposition, and it has a lot of different meanings to it and what it could indicate in the Arabic. The lam is seen primarily in one of three different ways. It's a lam that is said to be ta'ajjub, right? That it's like a lam that's supposed to cast into the reader a sense of wonder or amazement that what's going to follow, you're supposed to like take it into a place of just real kind of shock. It's got the word ajib in it, right? That has kind of the same similar meanings in Arabic, cognates in Hindu and Urdu and Bangla, right? Like this is something that's like, wow, what is this, right? The lam also is said to be a connector to the chapter that comes before it, Surah Fil. Does anybody know Surah Fil or what it's about? What's like the content of Surah Fil? Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. It's about like the story of the elephants and Abraha. Does anybody know? Yeah.
The elephants invaded Mecca.
They invaded Mecca. Yeah. So Abraha essentially develops a citadel. He's trying to challenge, historically, Mecca is like seen as an epicenter, and they have the Kaaba. And the Kaaba becomes now a principal point of kind of destination for numerous people. So Abraha, who's the king, is coming from Yemen, is in a space where he builds this like pristine cathedral because he wants people to start to make pilgrimage to there. And essentially, somebody vandalizes the cathedral, like defecates in it. Abraha gathers armies with giant elephants. What the chapter speaks about is how Allah protects the city of Mecca, right? He's protecting these people, the Quraysh. Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil, right? And it goes on, you know, in terms of how he sends like birds to pelt them with stones and does all these things, right? If you can recall like hearing about the chapter maybe when you were younger. The lam here, some people would say, is indicating that this is a connection to that chapter, that where it ends, this one picks up, right? Li'ila Quraysh, that, you know, the Quraysh, they are made to be secure. They are made to be given kind of various blessings. There's so much, we're going to talk about what this means in a little bit, but the lam is connecting to that. Or what they say is that this lam is connecting to this third verse, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ, right? That for this, then this. And when we come to the third verse, we'll make that connection. But that lam is really critical in being able to understand it, right? Because essentially it's now building into how it relates to the rest of the meaning of the chapter. لِإِلَافِ Quraysh. I want to talk about the word Quraysh before we talk about the word that's in between. Who is the Quraysh? Like, who are the Quraysh? What do we know about them? What do you know about the Quraysh as a people? Yeah.
Like an elite pagan tribe based in Mecca.
They're an elite tribe in Mecca, right? What else? What else do we know about them? They're in Mecca, yeah. What makes them elite?
Like businessmen.
Business people, yeah. These are like the caretakers of the Kaaba also, right? The Quraysh have a distinction in that they are from amongst the lineage that goes all the way back now. From their lineage comes also the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's of the Quraysh. There's a lot of hadith that talk about just the character, the notoriety of the Quraysh as individuals, highlighting who they are. This is important to understand that like what we have today in terms of the modern caretakers of the Quran, of the Kaaba, they're not like Qurayshites necessarily, right? So you don't want to equate like Saudi regimes currently and the current mode of governance to people who are Qurayshi, right? Qurayshi in and of themselves, right? You might know people whose last name is Qurayshi, right? Do you know anybody named Qurayshi, right? They're of the Quraysh, right? Abbasis are like of the Abbas, right? Siddiqui, you know, like so Qurayshis, some of them are probably actually of the Quraysh tribe, but in terms of just numbers, they're not like in abundance or in a multitude. And there's a lot of hadith that you can look up. You can Google the virtues, the benefits of the Quraysh. There's a lot that the Prophet ﷺ speaks about in terms of leadership coming from the Quraysh. He speaks about, you know, the best of individuals being of the Quraysh, you know, so much that's there. The word Quraysh itself is derived from a root that means two different things. One gives a kind of denotation of a lot of different tribes coming together and settling now in this area. So they're gathered all together and they make the Quraysh. So historically, what you have are numerous people all over the place. Mecca is not a space where people actually live for quite some time. But this chapter is also deeply linked to the story of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the Prophet Ibrahim, when he's commanded to take his wife Hajar, their son Ismail to the deserts, they're left there with just some dates and water, right? This is like part of the rituals of Umrah and Hajj. We follow the sunnahs of Hajar, that when the water runs out, the dates runs out, she runs between the hills of Safa and Marwa, looking for provision. Her infant child is kicking at the ground. The angel comes and hits where his blessed feet are kicking. The wells of Zamzam come forward, right? And when that water comes, there's now birds that flock to the middle of the desert because they see and become aware of the water. And the tribes that live in the area, one in particular called the Jurham, they don't understand why animals are going into the middle of the desert where there's nothing. And so they send some of their own tribesmen to figure out why they're going. And to their astonishment, they find not empty, barren desert, but they find this old woman, her infant child, in this large body of water. They ask her, can we settle around it? She says, yes, but the water is under my control. And this is how the city of Mecca starts to establish itself, right? People start to kind of settle around the water. And it's all these tribes gathering from different places. And that gathering element is one of the meanings of Quraysh, right? That they're made up of all of these different groups of people gathered together. Another meaning of Quraysh in Arabic, when you have this root, qaf, ra, sha, that the word Qarash in Arabic refers to like a really large sea animal. People would say it's a shark, they might say it's a whale, but when it's defined, they're defining it as an animal that eats in the water, in the bahr, right? It's the animal that eats but is not eaten. Does that make sense? Right? So it's the one that's out there and it's preying on people, but it's never the prey. It's the one that eats but is not eaten. And this is how the Quraysh are understood to be amongst their society, right? They are elite, like you're talking about. They're up here and they're treated differently than everybody else, right? They're like the animal that eats other animals, but is not the animal that's ever eaten. Does that make sense? And so the Quraysh are in specific being mentioned here by not just chance, but for us to recognize also who they were, understanding the key role they play in the Prophet ﷺ's lineage, and what that means in terms of the chapter on a whole, because Allah is singling them out now, and he's singling them out based off of the word that is left in the verse that says ilaf. Now, the problem when you like look up translations of this word ilaf, li ilafi Quraysh, there's like no consistent translations in English when you're looking at it. And people will define it in a lot of different ways.
The fundamental root of this has to deal with kind of softening someone's heart or love, right? Like you hear verses in the Quran that say, "Allafa bayna qulub," right? That love is being put between their hearts. When you're talking about individual Muslims coming together, the Muhajirin and the Ansar, like people who have no familiarity, Allah is saying that he's putting love between their hearts, right? If you've ever heard in California, Chicago, they have the Talif Collective. Has anybody ever heard of the Talif Collective in California? You guys have heard? It's an organization similar to like something that we do here. You guys can move up if you want. There's not like tons of people. It's okay. You can sit also be the uncles in the back of the room if you want, but nobody here is gonna bite. The Talif Collective was started primarily as a mode for providing convert care to individuals who are new to Islam, right? And it then built itself up into kind of this third space format where people who are not converts but looking for space to just belong, feel like they participate. But the idea was that you were rooting this in that notion of talif. You're building like love with gradual kind of consistency. Does it make sense, right? And you think about it. So many of you, when we talked about what was it like here for you, your first interactions, you came in Ramadan, you come to halakas, you come to gatherings, you just feel connected to people. Do you know what I mean? Right? You feel like you have a space where you meet friends, you can go and do things with them. You start to build bonds and relationships. They're not rooted in externals, they're rooted in internals, right? That comes from Allah. That's like the love that this verse is alluding to when it says ilaf, right? It's a coming together, a gathering, but it's meant to be like a softening, a tendering of one's heart, right? Li ilafi Quraysh. And so when people translate this word ilaf, or they give insight into ilaf and what it means, they're going to say that there's a few different ways that we can understand it. You can understand the word ilaf as a gathering of some type of, right? Like this is a gathering that is being alluded to of the Quraysh. In particular, it secondly means like being granted security of some kind, being given safety of some kind. And it also can thirdly mean or allude to like a custom, a practice, a ritual that was done at a specific time, like seasonally in some way, right? But think about that in the root of love, right? The ilaf now exists grammatically in a form that's distinct from ta'lif. There are two different types of grammatical forms, verb forms that are in like a infinitive case. Are people following what I'm saying? You understand like the grammar, right? So ilaf is distinct from talif because talif, like in the Talif Collective, it's about a love that's like gradual. You know, it's about a love that happens over time. You know, you and I meet each other for the first time and be like, oh yeah, we like each other. And we'll say salams to one another, but we don't really like each other. We don't even know each other. You know what I mean? There's probably some people here that you met and some of your first days here and you were talking to them and now you're like, I don't want to ever hang out with that person. They're pretty weird. And then there's other people who you also met, didn't spend so much time with them, but over time your hearts got connected to each other, right? And they're now friends of yours that you wouldn't ever think you would have been friends with. I see this with members of our community all the time because they're not in a space where everybody looks the same, or is of the same culture or the same race or class. And it creates a conundrum. It's like, wow, we are now friends, but I don't know how to bring you to my pre-existing group of friends because I bond with you over something that is inward and you're not the person I'm supposed to hang out with, the person that gets invited to dinners at my house, or we have iftar with in our local mosque, or who we go to see on Eid, that matches us in terms of shared externals and not only shared internals. But I can't do anything because there's a gradual connection of love in our hearts that's coming inwardly, right, from the divine. That's what talif is, right? It's a gradual progression. Ilaf is not gradual. It's just immediate. There's more of an instantaneous nature to it, right? The softening, the tenderness is there. When you see like a little kid, right? You all see my kids, right? You just give my kids things all the time. You like my kids, they're nice kids. You see babies, right? There's just a genuine nature to them. There's a sheikh that I'm pretty close to. He, said to this halakha group like a few years ago, pre-COVID, he came and we were looking at a text called The Book of Assistance by Imam al-Haddad, this book of spirituality. They're talking about the soul and like the spirit and his journey. And he said, why do you think most people like newborn babies? Why do you think? What do you think the answer is? Why do you like little kids? Unless there's something horribly wrong with you and you hate newborn babies. You hate little babies. Why do you think people like babies?
I think we associate them just like goodness and purity.
Goodness, purity, yeah. But like, think about it more deeply in the broader frame of like our theology. Or even just you. Why do you like babies? I like the way they smell. They're cute, But what do you like about little kids? What do you think you're drawn to them by? Any thoughts? You also do you just not like children? Yeah.
I feel like every time I hold a baby, it feels like a miracle. Like I'm just amazed.
By what?
That's where it all starts.
Yeah. But it's not though where it all starts, right? What?
They're so soft.
They're so soft?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. They're soft. What else? Unless you got like a little brown kid who's got hair everywhere, right? That's how most of us were born. But that softness, right? That newness, everything that you're talking about. So what the sheikh said was, what you're attracted to is inherent beauty that's of a new soul entering into this world. That spirit has not been made bitter, defiled in any way. It hasn't been exposed to anything problematic. It's literally going from the abode of the arwah, like from the abode of the souls, right? We all exist in this world right now, and there's souls that have not come into entrance in this world, right? And there's souls that have moved on from this world, right? May Allah grant them ease, make the best of our deeds the last of our deeds, and let us all be from amongst those who are given Jannah without any judgment, right? But when you see that baby and its softness and its purity and all this other stuff, immediately you feel a certain love for that child, right? There's immediately a softening of your inside, right? That's what ilaf is rooted in. We're talking about the way that it creates now this kind of gentleness, this kind of tenderness. And the lam is connecting it to the previous chapter because it's like, hey, Qurayshis, this entire army was coming to attack you and I stopped them, like God is saying. So for that, like have softness in your heart. Be in a place where you recognize the blessing that's given to you. It goes into some of the verses that come after, right? Ilafihim rihlat ash-shita'i was-sayf. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you want to understand this now as a principle, because I think it's very much so relevant to where we are and how we can craft a relationship with the divine. This is talking about the need to have softness in your heart, to have a tenderness in your heart, a recognition through blessings, ni'mah, whatever it is, but it's rooted in that same idea of love, ilaf, ta'lif, right? Allafa bayna qulub, like all of these things. This comes before the third verse that says, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. So then worship the Rabb of this house. Why people think this is a Meccan surah? Because it's talking about al-Bayt. It's in Mecca, right? It's talking about something that's very particular to Mecca. But the verse that talks about a need to have a soft heart precedes the verse that talks about worshiping God. Do you get what I'm saying? I want you to just think about it in your own socialization. When you were taught about how you relate to the divine, likely many of us are taught about like the fara'id, the haram. This is how you pray. This is like what the mechanics are. I'm not saying there's anything problematic with that, but what this chapter is giving us an indication to in terms of how we function as human beings, you got to take into consideration where the softening of the inside becomes a necessary prerequisite to having a robust relationship as an abd of God. And if you're not in the place where this is part of that prescription, and you get to a place where you're trying to now build this, right? I'm trying to have a relationship with Allah. I'm trying to pray my prayers. I'm trying to do the fara'id. I'm trying to stay away from the haram. I'm trying to do all of these different things. The challenge isn't always just in knowing the do's and don'ts of ibadah. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا, right? Sometimes the challenge in being able to be the abd that has that presence stems not from not knowing the do's and don'ts. It stems from not having a soft inside. You see what I mean? Because you're bringing now a heart, and that's a difficult thing to sometimes wrap our head around. And it's not always because of us, but where there's meant to be softness, there then becomes hardness, right? This is a paradox in our spirituality. Everybody know what a paradox is, right? Are people with me? I know I talk a lot. Yeah. So a paradox in our spirituality, right, is that a soft heart is a strong heart. And a hard heart is a weak heart. So we want to have soft hearts, right? May Allah grant us soft hearts. In order to get to this place where that connection can be made, you got to be able to look inside of yourself sometimes, right? So the chapter can be like a historical narrative. We're learning about Abraha the king and the army with the elephants, and the Prophet ﷺ is born in the year of the elephant. But it also fundamentally is giving us now, in the here and the now, a very important characteristic to our individual relationship with the divine. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, Inna lillahi ta'ala aniyatan min ahli al-ard. That indeed for Allah, inna lillahi ta'ala aniyatan min ahli al-ard, that indeed for Allah there are vessels from amongst the people of the earth. Wa aniyatu rabbikum, and the vessels of your Lord, qulubu ibadihi salihin, are the hearts of his righteous servants. Ahabbuha alyanuha wa arakuha, he loves the ones the most that are the most light and the most tender, the most soft, right? May Allah grant us hearts that are like this, right? And what do these words mean, right? To be lean, right? Ahabbuha, he loves, meaning like the default is he loves all of us. That's what you got to understand. And then narrowing that, ahabbuha alyanuha, he loves the ones that are most lean. Lean is like light, but essentially it's when you have advice given to you, you're willing to take advice. You don't throw like a hissy fit. Who are you to tell me something? But you're receptive to it, right? Like years ago, we used to be in the basement of a church on 6th Avenue. Before that, we were in the basement of the church that was here before this building was, right? And some of that might have been like, I don't even know if any of you remember those things. Did you ever come? You did, right? Yeah. Thank God for Omar Malik. Otherwise, I'd be very lonely here. Nobody knows anything accept us. So when we were in the church basement over there, you know, I'm turning 40 this year. I started working here, I was 22. And I'm wearing my thobe, I have my turban, I've given the khutbah, and I got my jeans on. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of me from when I was much younger, but I used to have really long Pantene Pro V, pretty boy hair. I wore like Abercrombie and Fitch and J. Crew all the time. And sometimes I wore jeans that were like 30 sizes too big on me, right? So this is one of the days, and it's still under my thobe, and it's still much bigger than me. And this elderly man, like really old, probably in his 70s, comes up to me. I'm not stereotyping him. He's wearing shvar kameez, got a big beard, and he pulled me to the side and he said, "You speak very well." I said, "Thanks, alhamdulillah." And he said, "Don't you know that the Prophet told us to not wear pants that come below our ankles like this?" Now I have a choice to make in that moment. I can seek to put down this man that's thrice my age, old as my grandfather. I can seek to defend myself and validate and justify, or not even for his sake, but for the sake of my own spiritual exercise. Really recognize the situation and the ethics called for in the situation, and how it's an opportunity for me to then think about what's going on in my inside. A soft heart is a strong heart. A hard heart is a weak heart. What does God want me to do in this circumstance? Put down somebody who's much older than me? Or try to like explain and justify something that at that moment has nothing to do with other than my own ego and arrogance? And I could feel it rising up, right? All kinds of words popping into my head to be able to explain it. But a lean heart, one that we should aspire towards, is one that's willing to take advice. It doesn't mean you take people's nonsense, right? There's a difference between somebody giving you advice with sincerity and compassion and somebody just being a gatekeeper that looks to push you down by bringing, you don't have to be somebody's doormat. That's not what we're talking about, right? But a willingness to just listen, So you want to start to soften. Who are those people in your life for you? And who do you go to? Somebody that's like, hey, you're not on the right track here. People that can provide you insight, that you can now feel still a sense of belonging, but you're willing to take that. This is a characteristic of a heart that is lean, a soft heart. May Allah grant us that. It's willing to take advice. It's willing to take feedback. And then a softness that right? Like the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they used to say to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, we're not the same as we are when we are with you than when we are away from you. And he would say, if you were the same as you were with me when you were away from me, the angels would come and start shaking your hands, right? There was a clear impact of the presence he had in their life. And they would say, Ya Rasulullah, Inna idha ra'aynaka raqqat qulubana, that indeed when we see you, our hearts, they become soft. The same way, when you hold that baby, your heart becomes soft, right? It has an impact on you. You come into certain spaces, it releases the tension, the anxiety. So you want to be able to have a relationship that embraces your fundamental role. You are Abd. There is one Rabb. The Meccans are being told this in the context now of these other things that are coming up to them. Right? So again, the ilaf is referenced twice. It's being repeated as a grammatical tool to emphasize that much more, right? That this again, we're showing to you, you got a lot of things that you have been given. You don't even have to stress about so much stuff. There's not anything you have to worry about. You have a rihla. A rihla is a very specific type of journey that distinct from just like certain travels, caravans people would go. A rihla is a journey that is characterized by the participant having a lot of like baggage with them, Not like emotional baggage that you're coming carrying a ton of crap with you. Well, I'll make it easy. But like you literally have a lot of different things that you are holding on as you go on this journey, right? رحلة الشتاء والصيف. You're doing this journey of the winter and in the summer, right? 2 seasons. They would go to different places, Yemen and Syria, merchandise, bring stuff back. Because in Mecca, there's nothing. You ever been to Mecca before? Just mountains. I was over there 2 weeks ago, a week ago. It's 120 degrees. It is super hot. Everything is mountainous. But there's always like fruit from everywhere. SubhanAllah. There's always food from everywhere. And this is a dua of the Prophet Ibrahim. That in that dua, he asks Allah to provide to the people of that place foods that come from everywhere, fruits in particular, thamarat. And he also asks for safety. So the wondrous nature of this, if that lam is used in that ta'ajjub sense, these are men and women in a Meccan Arabia, right? Where things are not just you walk down the street, you think about it in the context of where our sense of safety has been disrupted through mass shootings, all kinds of things. Allah protect us from it, right? These are people who, because they are Quraysh, they're elite. They take these journeys, nobody messes with them. They are the caretakers of the Kaaba. They have a reputation. Nobody will touch them. They are protected on these journeys. They got tons of stuff with them. It's a rahla. Somebody who is a caravan raider, a robber, somebody who's looking for someone vulnerable to attack, they're going to see you. They're going to see you on this journey. You got a lot of stuff I could take. Nobody's taking anything from them. In the context of what we are reciting every day, Allah is telling them, you got nothing to stress. You live in a land where there's nothing, yet you still have food from every place. You don't have to worry about money. You can go on these journeys, and even when you don't go, right? The Meccans were so stable that they could say sometimes, I don't want to go on this journey this year. I'm good. Because they had the Kaaba, everybody also came to them. They would come for their own understandings of worship, pilgrimage, and they'd bring all of this stuff with them. It can create now an absence because you're juxtaposing a reality that has a very subtle nuance to it. My vision can be one that gets me stuck in the provision, or the provision can be the mechanism that enables me to understand who the provider actually is. And so these guys get stuck in a place where they also then start to bury their women alive. They start to mistreat those who come from no lineage, who are of different races, different classes. They do all kinds of terrible things. But they're in a space where they have bounties, they have blessings, they have all kinds of ni'mah. And the idea is to sit and just say, look at this. Let it be something that opens up your heart. The fa here is like the fa that we saw in Surah Qawsar, right? Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli, right? The fa there, right? So inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, that indeed we gave you al-kawthar. We said al-kawthar exists in a grammatical form like of a multitude of blessings, right? Like in Arabic, the word star is kawkab. And when you look in the stars, there's like an infinite number of stars, right? Kawkab, like a multitude of stars. Similar, kawthar. You got a lot of blessings, a lot of favors that are bestowed upon you. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. This was given to you, these blessings, fasalli li rabbika wanhar. So because of the blessings, then pray to your Lord and then sacrifice, do the naha, right? So that fa is connecting it. Because you have these bounties, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. Then because of that, worship the Lord of this house. الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ, the one who essentially has like fed you, given you food, taken you from hunger. وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ, and has given you like a peace of mind, a sense of security, taking you away from fear, right? These are blessings of prosperity. These are blessings that, may Allah enable us to have them. So you start to then think about it within your own day to day. It's talking to the Quraysh, being like, what more do you need, right? Nobody's hurting you. Nobody's harming you. You get to go peacefully in and out. You have food from everywhere, your choice of food. So when you're reciting this chapter, you're invoking those ideas. Li-ilafi Quraysh, because it's rooted in ilaf, there's love there. It's coming from a God who's a source of love. Not a God that is looking for a reason to push you down, but a God that's looking for a reason to bring you close, bring you up. Ilafihim rihlat ash-shita'i was-sayf, right? Some of us struggle financially, but it's crazy different from people in other places. And that comparison is not meant to be one that has to be self-deprecating, but just as objective as possible. I was on Umrah, right? In these last couple of weeks, and I got really sick. And so I went to breakfast in the hotel. All the waiters are immigrants. And I could ask these guys for anything and they bring it to me, subhanAllah. So I said, can you make me some tea with lemon and honey and ginger? And they made like the best lemon, honey, ginger tea. This one like Pakistani guy, man, make dua for him. His smile on his face the whole time. He was like, of course I'm going to make it for you. He brought back a pitcher. I was like, can't drink all. He's like, just take it with you. And I was like, are you allowed to tell me to take this? He was like, yeah. I saw him at breakfast at about 6:30 in the morning. After I prayed Fajr and I prayed Ishraq, when the sun is completely risen, there's 2 rak'ahs the Prophet ﷺ would pray for Salat al-Ishraq. And after that, I went to have breakfast and this guy was there. And I said to him, hey man, you're the same guy that made me tea at dinner last night. And I saw you at 10 p.m. and I left here at 11:30 because my friends and I sat here and drank the amazing tea you made for us. And we were the last ones to leave and you left after we did. And now it's 6 o'clock in the morning and you're here again. I was like, have you gone to sleep? Did you even go home? He said, no, like I slept. I left here at 11. I said, you didn't because I left at 11:30 and you cleaned up and left after me. He said, I left after you left. I said, when did you get back here? He said, I came back here and got breakfast ready. He's telling me about how he hasn't seen family in so long. And he lives in this place and he's got challenges, but it's still worth it because he saves more to give back to those that he's left behind. There's a guy that drove me and my friends to Taif. I've never been to Taif before. So I was trying to go to different places that I hadn't seen. Went to Taif, we're trying to go to Badr, try to go to places that I haven't been to before. And so a taxi cab driver, again, from a South Asian background, he picked us up. It's crazy, some of the things this man said to me. We're talking about what it's like for him to live there. This is like an older, brown, Pakistani man. He is exactly how you're picturing him in your head. Can't speak English, speaks Urdu and Arabic only. I'm translating for him, for the rest of my friends. And he's talking to me about where he's only been to Pakistan in his life to Dubai for a layover and here in Mecca where he works. I said, do you want to ever come to America? He said, no way. I said, why? He's like, I hear how you treat people there. And then this guy who's driving me through the mountains of Taif started to tell me about George Floyd and what this country did to people like George Floyd. And then he started to tell me about how he hasn't seen his family for months. He drives his car all day, all night, is away from family. But why is he doing this? I want you to juxtapose this, not in a self-deprecating way, but in what this chapter is asking us to reflect on. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. Why? لِإِلَافِ قُرَيْشٍ. Let your heart be tender. I want you to think about it, right? When have you ever had to worry about not having water to drink? Just a simple reflection, not something that's meant to be things that are out there or what, like just really think about it, right? Literally, any one of us right now could go stand at the water fountain, drink as much as we want, and then the next person could drink as much as they want. If we didn't want to wait for somebody, we could go to another floor where they have the same water fountain. We didn't want to take the stairs down. We could walk across in a hallway to a building that connects us to the building next door so that we don't even have to walk in the heat outside. And then there's water fountains over there. And if you feel grossed out at drinking from the water fountain, you could just go to the vending machine on the second floor and buy a cold bottle of water. Right? This is what it's saying. الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ. The min is critical to understand because you're literally being taken away from hunger. Starvation is being taken, you're away from it. It's all the way over there. You're over there, hunger's over there. Right? You think about it. In Ramadan, this is not a reality across the board. There are people in our community, in our Islamic Center community, they don't have food to eat. May Allah make it easy for them. They don't have stuff to drink. May Allah make it easy for them. But for the most part, we live in a place where we have peace of mind that comes from safety. We have peace of mind that comes from food. You're not worried about hunger in that way, right? And that's not like Shaitan's tool to get you to hate on yourself. But you then have access to an opportunity that is rooted in the ability to soften one's heart. لِإِلَافِ قُرَيْشٍ. We protected you from an army. The connection, if you use the lam in that way, if Abraha's army was not destroyed, they could not do the rihla to Yemen because Abraha's army would then be there to attack them. So Allah is saying, I've taken away anything that could cause you any type of issues and problems. You are the elite, the nobility. You have food from everywhere. You can drink whatever you want to drink. You got peace of mind. You can go on journeys without anybody having to even worry that something's going to happen to you. You make money. You have this trade route that brings in sustenance and provision. So all of that, use it as a basis to soften your inside. So what? فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. So that you can truly worship with real love the Lord of this house, the one who's the creator of everything. Does this make sense? What do we think? And so what this chapter is saying, what is it saying in the connection between softness and its overall content? What is it claiming is one of the means to softness of the heart? Gratitude. Yeah, like you practice it, and not like in a way that, oh, everybody says, like you actually do it. You sit down, you find like spaces where you can reflect and you practice very deeply gratitude so that it kind of, builds that softness in your heart. You see what I'm saying? You don't have to then turn to other things for satisfaction because you start to see what's there. And that's what it's fundamentally saying. Like, what more do you need to have, you literally are people that were given everything, you're in this space where you're like untouchable. The name Quraysh, we said, right? It's the fish that eats and it's not eaten, like nobody's able to mess with you. You know what I mean? Wake up, right? And wake up your inside. So it's positing the idea that the recognition of this in and of itself can render that softness, Does that make sense? How do you do that then? Like, how can you do that specifically? Or what are other things you talked about? Or you can answer that question. Like, how do I start to actively practice gratitude? A way to increase beauty is by engaging in acts of beauty. You engage in service of people, you engage in helping and assisting people, right? You really have an appreciation of what you have, like the aspirational level of understanding appreciation in that context is a willingness to give it to somebody else, right? That's where the love aspect comes in, right? So I love the security. I mean, like, think, man, I don't know what it's been like for you in the last few weeks, like 200 mass shootings. It's crazy in a matter of months, right? It's insane. And you see like what people are drawn towards. People drawn towards greed, drawn towards selfishness, and distractions that come in the way that have us socialized to, in a consumer-driven society, still feel inadequacy in what we have. And a chapter like this is meant to say, like, you have so much beauty, you have so much light, you have so much to offer. Why are you identifying your life and your existence and yourself in terms of what's not there? Like, see what's actively there. See yourself the way God sees you. فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. Don't go worship anything else. Don't worship a dollar. Don't worship the validation of a society that looks for a reason to push you down. Don't worship the world that judges you because of your skin color or your race or your name, or tells you you're not good enough because you dress this way or don't dress this way, or because you practice these things. You have a ring on your finger, you don't have one, you don't have children, you don't have a house. There's no shortage of reasons as to why someone can make you feel like garbage. So it's not for the benefit of God that God is saying, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ, but as a reminder of the one who gave you all of the provision in the first place, the one who truly cares about you. You're going to worship something, worship the entity that's the one that's giving you all of the blessings in the first place. And it's without conditions to love, because Allah doesn't gain anything from it directly, right? I can always take something from you. Even by me doing for you, there can be a gain in it for me. The gain in recognizing the divine is simply still for you. Allah is ghani, like he's self-sufficient. That's why he is Rabb and we are all ibad, because we all rely on something to exist. That's the definition of an abd. You need something to exist. You are not self-sufficient. Allah uniquely is Rabb, because he does not need anything to exist, right? So that gratitude now is again like coming back, not because you owe it to God in the sense that God is in need of it, but you need to be able to see and appreciate so that you can live life with a certain softness inside. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? What am I saying? Or other thoughts? What else did we talk about just in the last few minutes that we have here? What did you talk about? Takeaways? How can you start to practice gratitude in your life? So why don't we do this just again so people can walk away like talking this out, right? Because it's important. You know, I teach a course here. It's one of the most popular classes at the university. We had 188 students last semester from all over the university with a huge waiting list. All we do is talk to people about self-development, progression of the self. So class is called What Really Matters, Leadership with No Regrets. And it's posited on a study done by end-of-life practitioners that as they meet with people and they're about to die, the regrets they have most in their life, like as they're dying, right? And what I tell my students in that class is like, the ones of you that will gain something from this are the ones that act upon what we're teaching you. There's a reason why thousands of like personal development books are written all the time that say the same thing and they're bestsellers, because tons of people read them, but like dozens of people act upon what's there. They put into practice, right? So you have to decide, do you want to live an agitated life? Do you want to live a life that you feel overwhelmed, where it's hard to like deal with challenges in life? The Quran is very clear on this. It gives you insight to yourself, saying that if you want to be able to deal with garbage, it's gonna come. You want to also be able to feel much better in success. You start to now pay attention to other parts of yourself. And this principle of gratitude is embedded across literally the first word you say when you recite Fatiha, Alhamd. It's just there right from the onset. So as a principle, not theoretically, but in practice, you are serious about your spiritual diet and you are serious about the state of your heart. Gratitude has to be harnessed as a tool. You can't think about it in absolutes, that I'm either grateful or an ingrate. That's not the only two things that exist, right? But with real courage and audacity, you start to think about, at this stage in my spiritual life, where being Muslim is now not simply an identity variable, but I start to think critically and deeply about everything God has given to me in instruction for my benefit. How do I practice gratitude? What are things that I can do with regularity? You just talk to the people around you. Like, what are things that we can start to do, implementing into our life so that we start to then reap those benefits from it? And as a point, just to give you an idea, contentment isn't the absence of sadness or grief, right? Our Prophet cried when his son died, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was in a place where he was deeply impacted at the loss of his wife Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, his uncle Abu Talib. He got sad, he got down. You can be content and be sad. You can be content and have grief. It's about having balance still inwardly. These two things are not mutually exclusive. They can coexist. So we're not trying to pursue what consumer-driven societies claim, this like false kind of sense of happiness, that you got to just be laughing all the time, right? What if you were laughing at a funeral? You have been lost your damn mind. You're laughing at a funeral. You saw somebody laughing at a funeral, but that's what people understand contentment to be. I'm not supposed to be down. No, there's times when you should normally be down. If you're not down in certain times, then there's something off with you, right? So how do you practice gratitude, like in a real way, right? How do we start to, what are the things we need to remove? What are the things we need to put in practice? You just talk to each other for a couple of minutes, and we'll come back and discuss, and then we'll wrap up for today. Right? We want to start to like act on what the Quran teaches us. We want to like draw a deeper meaning from these chapters that we read constantly, you know? So this tells us a lot about different things. Fundamentally, it's also saying like, here's the basis through which you want to engage in your relationship with your heart, with your spirit, with your celestial self, with the divine. So how do we start to practice gratitude? What do we do? Okay, so let's just break this down really quickly, right? It sounds nice, right? It doesn't mean anything. Do you know what I mean? And you're not going to do this because there's nothing to do here, right? Doing good for others means like you can stay and vacuum this floor after we all leave. right? You can like, put armor on your back and carry him home piggyback style, right? And be like, thanks for the ride, right? It can mean so many different things. Because it can mean so many different things, it then ends up not meaning anything at all, right? And so you start to bring specificity to it on an individual basis, right? What am I going to do today that is good for somebody? And I have to bring some specificity to it because it's the equivalent of saying, I'm going to exercise more. That can mean 5 minutes more or 5 hours more. Doesn't mean anything. Not because you don't necessarily know what you want to do, but it lacks specificity and definition. So in your routine, this is an important thing. The active engagement, especially where you still have access to it. I mean, not with any sense of like arrogance or disrespect, right? But what must people be thinking, man? I went to Texas like the week that the shooting happened in Texas. And I went to a school where I was invited because a teacher at that school a week before had been killed by her husband, domestic violence victim. He killed her, her mother, their 4-year-old daughter, and then killed himself. These people are hurting, right? Allah make it easy for them. I flew out there. The guy called me. He was like, can you come? We don't know what to do. I looked at my wife and she was like, this is not even a thing to think about. So I got on whatever flight I could get on. I got out there with them, did what I needed, what I could do to help in whatever little capacity, right? They don't have this peace of mind. You understand? It's not because they did anything or they're not deserving of it, but it's not there. They had to come back as teachers to a school to pretend like this. What do I tell my kids that this happened to another teacher? And then there was a shooting that happened in between. They got to find the strength to still come and do that, right? Do you see what I'm saying? So this, you want to draw a principle of, right? You don't want to get to a place where people had a wake-up call on this last week again. Hajj changed for Americans. The number of people I spoke to, they're like, man, I wish I went before they changed it. Why didn't you? And that's like with love, right? Want to shake somebody, be like, you have tons of money. You could have gone. Why did you not go? What are you waiting for? And you don't want to get to a place where not your ability simply to do good, but your ability to do leaves, right? Hadith, 5 before 5. There's a lot of wisdom in it, right? So you want to take advantage of health before sickness. You want to take advantage of your youth before you become old. Because then you don't have the physical capacity to do it. And you spend so much time going in pursuit of money. When is it enough, right? So you got to break down, pull out a notebook when you get home tonight. What am I going to do tomorrow? 3 things, 5 things in specific that are for somebody good. And that good thing that you do can also be back for you. What am I doing that's good for me? And you have like a metric that you can go back and assess that you stay honest to. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Do you get what I'm saying and why this is important, right? So you should start to have strategy to like what you're doing. The amazing thing here would be the good thing that you're doing is also something that you love to do, right? A good friend of mine works at the university. He's the rabbi at NYU. He is like very like skinny, right? I get fat all the time. And so I talked to him about his exercise routine. This man doesn't do anything except run. And I said, why? Like, and we have gone on trips together. I see him like running around Washington Square Park in his undershirt at times. And he runs all the time. He said when he was younger, he was trying to figure out how to do this exercise thing. And somebody told him, well, you should try to exercise in a way that the exercise you do is something you enjoy doing. So he said, I like to run. So that's what I do. And I've been able to do it now. He's older than me. He's been doing it since he was a little kid. He stays in shape. So if you can find something that is good to do that you actually are passionate about or you love to do, and it's just going to be easier to do. You see what I mean? It's going to render some of what we're talking about. What else? I promise I'm not going to talk so much now. What else did we talk about? How do we practice gratitude? What's getting in the way? What are things we can do? So do this. This is embedded in our tradition. The Prophet ﷺ tells his companions at the end of a prayer, say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar. Not the 33 times each that we know, Tasbih Fatima, but 10 times he says you do it. 10 times Subhanallah, 10 times Alhamdulillah, 10 times Allahu Akbar. You do it 30 times in total, right? 10 plus 10 plus 10 is 30. 5 prayers, they'll be written for you 10 times over. So 150 times, 1,500 is what's going to be written for you. Then he tells them, there's going to come a time where people won't do it. They say, why? Like, why would somebody not do it? It takes you 10 seconds to do one of these things. He said, because their hearts are going to be distracted by something else. So in order for you to sit and reflect, you got to first sit and be comfortable with stillness. You could do this twice a day for 15 minutes. You could also do it a couple of times in a week. But you build out the prompt. Go on Google and just type in prompts for gratitude reflection, gratitude journaling. And then you start to write it in a notebook and then you answer it. Does it make sense? You can do this after your prayers. Why are you glorifying God? Subhanallah, right? The word subh in Arabic means also the morning. You know, you ever look at the sunrise and you see like how magnificent it is. And it's like, wow, subhanallah, right? Like that's like majesty. So why am I proclaiming that greatness? You know, why am I saying alhamdulillah? Why am I praising God? I attach meaning to it. You see? What else? What are other things that we can do? It's not an exhaustive list, but as many ideas as possible. Fasting. Fasting. How does fasting help? Anybody who's serious about their spiritual diet, if they have the physical capacity to fast, they will fast. You come to this halakha on Mondays. I fast on Mondays and Thursdays. A lot of people know that in our community. I know the building isn't open until Maghrib time right now at this part of the summer, but I don't mind sticking around in the area. We can pray and have dinner together somewhere also afterwards if people want to do that. I would love to do that with people, right? But you should have like a regular fast and don't be daunted by it. You know what I mean? It's not for somebody else to do. It's for you to do. You should be doing this, right? What else? What else are things you can do to practice gratitude? Yeah, and the Mufassirin, when they talk about sabr, right? Like in the Quran, it says, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, that seek isti'ana, right? إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, right? Isti'ana to God. So وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, that seek isti'ana, help, assistance with sabr, patience, and salah. They say sabr means fasting, right? That's what one of the definitions is of this. Yeah, positive self-talk, right? Shaitan is going to get you strategically with negative self-talk. It's going to get you to hate on everything and hate on yourself and build cognitive core beliefs that are rooted in negative affirmations, right? And one of the things that we can build off of this also is the literal practice of gratitude. You know, like say thank you to people. Appreciate them. This is hadith. He who is not thankful of people is not thankful of the divine. I just want you to think about this, right? Like not begrudgingly or mechanically, but with your heart. How many people did you say thank you to today? And how is it possible that that's the number of people that you thanked today? And I'm sorry if somebody hasn't said thank you to you in a long time. You do amazing things for lots of people, whether you are conscious of it or not. But you want to be able to think for yourself, right? Where is that affirming voice back to oneself and a source of affirmation for others, right? You acknowledge people's existence. You let them know that they're seen, that you value them. You know, I took my son with me to a Baked by Melissa in the middle of the pandemic. We were going to a friend's house and we were getting cupcakes. And so my wife and daughter are standing outside. My son and I are standing inside. And there's one guy working at this bake by Melissa, and he's standing up. He's not seated. So I used to own a restaurant on McDougal Street, closed down a couple of weeks ago. If you don't know if we're coming back or not over here, but we're going to try, inshallah. The butchery is still open. You just come to my house, same meat. We'll just cook it for you and you can eat it in my house. When I went into the Bake by Melissa, I'm also seeing it now as somebody who's owned a restaurant and a business. And in my store, anytime you've gone, we try to have, pre-COVID, there was 3 people working, sometimes 4. In the pandemic, 2 people. And it was really hard when one person got sick. We couldn't get somebody else in to replace them. You don't want somebody to have to work like that. And so I see this guy and I see he's got no chair. In my head, I'm like ordering cupcakes from him. And my son is like 5 at this time. And he's looking at me and I'm talking to this guy. And I said, do you need anything? He said, no, I'm okay. And I'm like, no, really? Like, do you need anything? Right? Because he's by himself. So he can't lock the door. He'll get fired. He can't go and take a break to eat. He'll get fired. He can't even stop to go to the bathroom. So I said, why don't you go do whatever you need to do? And my son and I'll stand here for a minute and you get off your feet, go use the restroom, do whatever. And the guy, like, he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, of course, man. What do you mean? And then he went and simply just used the bathroom, sat down for 2 minutes to drink some water. He could drink it standing and whatever else, right? It's not that he couldn't do that. It's just the idea that now he had this space. And then he came from behind the counter and, it's COVID, so he doesn't know what to do. He's like, kind of like, bangs his elbow against me. And then he's like, can I hug you? And I said, of course. And then my son, Kareem, when we left, he said, Baba, is that your friend? And I was like, no. He's like, do you know him? I said, never met him before. And he said, what was going on? I said, like, Kareem, you gotta like pay attention to people and be able to like see them as whole people and recognize with affirmation that they also exist and they have needs. This guy might have been standing for 12 hours, 10 hours without any type of break whatsoever. And no one is saying, how are you doing? What do you have going on? And it shouldn't be that because I own a restaurant that I'm thinking about what it's like for him working in this industry. It should just be something that comes like innately, right? It's much easier to see things when your heart is also in a state that it's what's seeing the world. And it's not just your eyes that are looking. You get what I mean? And so that softening is necessary so that it's now not just, that's a guy in a uniform that's here to serve me. Then when he said thank you to me, I swear to God, you all are my family. I love you. So there's no like formalities. I started to tear up. I said, what do you mean? We are in the midst of a pandemic. My children and I can't even go to most stores right now. And you are making cupcakes for little kids to smile. And you are thanking me? You're giving my son and my daughter something that I literally don't have any other way to give to them, if not because of you. You get what I'm saying? And then the same way you feel at the end of a gratitude journal, right? My son, like, Baba, what is wrong with you? What's going on? It's like, I'm not crying because I feel bad, man. I'm crying because I feel good. And I want to always be in a place where even just something as simple as thanking the cupcake a guy, like, gives me enough energy to keep going. It doesn't have to be like something grand. Do you get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Okay, let's pause here. We're not going to meet here next Monday because the building's closed in person. We might do it over Zoom. Sheikh Sahib Webb is not going to be here in person tomorrow or Wednesday. He'll be here for Jummah on Friday to give the khutbah, but we're going to still have people gather here, and he's going to do his halaqah over Zoom. But we're going to try to have people still be here so that it's still interactive in the ways that are here. If you want to listen in from home, feel free. He had to unexpectedly leave the city just for a few days, but he'll be back on Friday, inshallah, for Jummah. We're doing Fried Chicken Friday on Friday. If you've never been to Fried Chicken Friday, has anybody here ever been to Fried Chicken Friday? Just you? You been to Fried Chicken Friday? Yeah? Isn't it great? Yeah, it's so good. So come to Jummah on Friday. You should come to Jummah because going to Jummah is good. But also, if you're looking for another reason, come for amazing soul food lunch, get to sit down. We used to get about 800 people at Jummah. Now we're at about 250, alhamdulillah. It's starting to grow every week. More people are coming, different people are coming. You want to reestablish a relationship with the Friday prayer, not in a burdensome way, but in a way that understands that it's a means to soften your heart. You make it a priority for yourself. You get to come and be with people that are similar background, age, life experience. It's just a nice way to also make friends and meet people.
If you would like to listen to more, please donate to www.icnyu.org/donate. For more of our virtual programs, go to www.icnyu.org/classes. If you have any questions, email us at info@icnyu.org.